Good morning, and thank you so much for joining me for the Central Pennsylvania Chamber's first ever virtual legislative breakfast. Of course, I would much rather be greeting you all in person, seeing your smiling faces on a bright and early Friday morning, and enjoying the delicious food at the country cupboard. Unfortunately, the circumstances that we're all facing did not allow that to be possible. But in an effort to keep some sense of normalcy with having to cancel so many events, I wanted to make sure we could still make this some type of event that would keep on your calendar and allow you to get out of the ruts that we're all getting stuck in regards to being in isolation and quarantine. So here we are all together this morning for the state issue legislative breakfast. We had taken the opportunity to issue a notification to those who registered for the event months prior and our President's Club members to go ahead and submit questions in regards to state issues. And of course, the majority of those are related to COVID-19. And then we went to pursue whom we would get to speak at this event. And we found 4 very intelligent and very well-rounded individuals who know you, our members, very well, and also know the current situations that we're facing as residents of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So today, joining us answering the questions would be Alex from the PA Chamber of Business and Industry, and also Steve Stumbris from the Bucknell SBDC, and our great, very interactive and involved state representatives, Lynda Culver and David Rowe. We've been in direct contact with these individuals since day one when our businesses were shut down. And we have been very, very, very satisfied with the ability that they've had to keep us up to date and posted on all current happenings. So I want to make sure that we very much extend a gracious thank you to them, and also for taking the time to have to do these candid questions and answers in their own areas remotely. Being on video is new and uncomfortable for many of us, but thankfully here at the Central PA Chamber, we have a very capable communication director, Jeff Schaefer, who's taken the time on a very short time frame to put it all together and make it a very top-notch event, as you would expect from the Central PA Chamber. Please know that we truly miss you. We cannot wait to see you again. And also, please know that I honestly believe that we all are going to survive and thrive in regards to the current situations we're facing. Thank you so much. Sit back, get your breakfast, and enjoy the legislative breakfast.
My name is Alex Halper. I'm Director of Government Affairs for the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. I want to thank TJ for inviting me to be part of your virtual legislative breakfast this morning, and thanks to her team for helping to put this together. I wish I was with you all up there in person this morning. Of course, the situation being what it is, I'm glad we at least have this opportunity. I, like I'm sure many of you, are getting used to working from home. I have found that the quietest place in the house is down in the basement, where, as you might have noticed, I have some of my favorite Philadelphia Eagles memorabilia hanging. Apologize for the somewhat casual background here, but to any of you Eagles fans out there, go Birds. I'll talk a little bit this morning about some of the laws that have been passed at both the federal and state level, some of the issues that we're working on at the PA Chamber. But first, I really would like to recognize the tremendous work that your chamber and chambers of commerce around Pennsylvania have been doing during this difficult time. It has been gratifying to see how chambers have really stepped up and worked on behalf of their members, businesses in their regions. And I think the breakfast this morning and TJ continuing this program is an excellent example of that. At the PA Chamber, we've been compiling information, trying to keep Pennsylvania employers as educated as possible. There's a lot happening on the public policy front, and we have been focusing on making sure employers have up-to-date, accurate information that they can base business decisions on. It's hard to believe it's already been a month since some of the real substantial legislation was passed down in Washington, D.C. Back on March 18th, Congress passed and ultimately the President signed the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. That law included a number of provisions, probably most relevant to employers, dealt with mandatory paid leave. This was both an emergency paid sick leave for individuals who were directly impacted by the pandemic or are caring for individuals directly impacted, and then an extended Family and Medical Leave Act to care for children whose schools or daycare centers have been shut down. These programs were generally meant to apply to employers with fewer than 500 employees, although employers with fewer than 50 employees may qualify for an exemption if providing this paid leave would jeopardize the viability of your business. Now, it's the intention of the FFCRA, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, for employers to be able to recover the costs associated with providing this paid leave, ultimately through offsets in the employer Social Security tax. But certainly understand that for many employers, from a cash flow perspective, providing this leave is going to be difficult. But I certainly encourage you to look into that more. Look into these programs more closely. These requirements did go into effect on April 1st. About a week or so, 9 days after FFCRA was passed, Congress passed the CARES Act. This is the over $2 trillion economic recovery stimulus legislation. A number of programs and provisions in this law that are relevant to employers. Probably most popular has been the Paycheck Protection Program. This is a loan program that the Small Business Administration is coordinating with local banks and lenders to provide loans to employers to keep employees on payroll. And if they do so, those loans are potentially forgivable. So if you have not already, I certainly encourage you to look into that program, as well as a number of other both tax credits and loans and other funding opportunities that are intended to help employers get through this difficult situation. These laws also made significant changes to unemployment compensation, both providing for enhanced benefits, extending unemployment compensation for a longer duration, and expanding eligibility for UC to a number of categories of individuals who are typically not qualified. Certainly encourage both employers and employees, if necessary, to look into the unemployment compensation program. In Pennsylvania, we have seen over 1 million claims, and it has certainly strained the administration of the program. And I think part of the reason why we've seen something like Paycheck Protection Program emerge is recognizing the strain on UC and trying to come up with ways to keep individuals employed and directing funds through just regular wages. But clearly these are all meant to support individuals and support businesses during this difficult time.
Good morning, Chamber members. I'm State Representative Lynda Culver, and I represent the great people from parts of Northumberland and Snyder counties. I'm sorry we are unable to be together in person today, but applaud the Central PA Chamber for putting together this Good Morning virtual legislative breakfast so that we can continue to stay in touch, communicate, and discuss the issues that face us today. And hopefully, together, we can find solutions to the many concerns we face during this pandemic. We are now experiencing something like we have never faced before. I know that people are experiencing many different emotions and feelings, from feeling frightened, frustrated, stressed, and even bored. I can assure you that your elected officials at all levels of government are working together to try and meet the needs of every citizen of this Commonwealth. Unfortunately, there is no playbook that we can look back on and rely on for accurate information. And whether or not you agree with our highest ranking decision makers, from our president, the governor, or even your mayor, you need to trust that they are making decisions based on the information they have and what they feel is best for the general populace. You may not always agree with those decisions, and you may question them. I encourage your feedback. It is important to understand the decisions being made and how they affect you in your business, your home, and your daily life. It is with this information that we can communicate with the decision makers and correct any unintended consequences or something inadvertently being overlooked.
Good morning to you all, and thank you for having me. First of all, I want to commend the Chamber for all of the hard work and effort they put in to make this event happen. Second of all, I want to point out that I am recording this video on Monday, April 13th, so some of the answers to questions might seem like old news by the time this video is produced. Finally, I do want to take a moment to recognize the immense physical, mental, and economic hardship that is being endured by so many Pennsylvanians across the Commonwealth, and especially here in our area. We are blessed to have some of the lowest infection rates in the state, but we also have some of the highest unemployment numbers. If there's anything that I can do for you, your family, or your loved ones, whether it's providing assistance with unemployment compensation or providing clarity on the governor's list of essential businesses, please feel free to reach out and we'll do what we can to help you or at least point you in the right direction. My office phone number is 570-966-0052, or you can feel free to email me directly at drowe@pahousegop.com. That's DROWE@pahousegop.com.
I can't speak on behalf of the governor or Secretary Levine, nor am I privy to the same information that they are. But I understand why he methodically issued the shelter-in-place order. COVID-19 has been slowly making its way through all 67 counties, with the first cases in early March, and by the beginning of this week in all 67 counties. Pennsylvania is a large and geographically diverse state, and I know that the governor consulted with county commissioners and mayors in our larger cities on what it would mean to their communities and how it would be received and implemented in those counties and municipalities. I can only imagine how difficult it would be to make that decision. We have counties or municipalities considered hotspots and others who didn't have any reported cases. We have people living in those communities who wanted shelter in place before there were cases or even very few cases, and others who still don't believe it is necessary or want to adhere to the shelter in place order. I think looking at each community, how they live their daily lives, and the impacts of the decisions on the people was an appropriate response to issuing the order.
As I've always said, the COVID-19 crisis is one that we do need to take seriously, and that means planning for the future, not just today. Responsibly managing the crisis means taking a long-term, big picture perspective. As an equal branch of government, the governor should have consulted with the General Assembly before issuing his initial shutdown order, but instead he gave us less than 5 minutes notice. As a result, we had to spend several days following the initial shutdown order, frantically trying to salvage critical components of the supply chain which were left compromised. Pennsylvania is a big state with diverse communities of varying population densities, and a one-size-fits-all plan won't work. That's why I did give the governor credit for his regional county-by-county stay-at-home order. But now that we are dealing with a statewide stay-at-home order, it's more important than ever to maintain that big picture, long-term perspective. All of our neighboring states have adopted the more objective Cyber and Infrastructure Security Agency guidelines for essential businesses, while Pennsylvania lags behind, yet leading the nation in unemployment. If we don't start planning for the future today, Pennsylvania may never catch up.
That is a sentiment that we have heard from many of our members in the construction field, many of whom had been operating under CDC guidelines with respect to mitigating spread and social distancing well before those went into effect. There is legislation, House Bill 2400, which, as of this recording, had passed out of committee in the House and was before the full House of Representatives in Harrisburg, which would allow for the construction industry to resume. So we were all keeping a close eye on that legislation, as well as the administration and DCED on how they will progress with the business shutdown order, and certainly hoping for a quick bounce back and for these industries to be able to reopen.
So as I'm sure many of you know, the list of essential and non-essential employees came as a surprise to both the legislature and the business community. There was a public outcry from the business community and its employees for help and understanding as to where their business fell on the list of essential employees. There was, frankly, a lot of gray area. The governor quickly set up a waiver system that was immediately overwhelmed with requests and since then has been closed. From minutes after the governor's announcement and even still yesterday, I am being contacted from businesses looking for clarification or for a waiver to continue to work. Every House member has been in contact with the governor's office on behalf of businesses in their districts, and it is because of your input that the governor continues to revise the list. Today, the Pennsylvania House of Representatives will be taking up Senate Bill 613, which has an amendment in it to allow business to continue to operate under the CISA, which is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency guidelines, while at the same time complying with social distancing and sanitary standards of today. We have heard from so many businesses and people who have been adversely impacted by the current order that we wanted to try and provide some relief to them and restart the economy for our road to recovery. Since I am recording this message for you before we go to the floor today to vote on the bill, I am unable to predict the outcome. However, I, along with the chambers, will be posting this information for you. I would like to address, though, the continuation of the construction project at Evangelical Community Hospital. I received calls and concerns about the construction project and reached out to Kendra Acker, president and CEO at the hospital. The hospital initially had to stop work along with everyone else. They applied for and were granted a waiver from DCED. The project, which would provide additional hospital beds, is essential for the treatment of patients with the coronavirus and was within months of completion. The project was granted a waiver provided they followed the social distancing and sanitary policies set forth by the governor's office. To meet those guidelines, they have reduced the number of workers on the job site. They work in split shifts and implemented sanitary precautions and have been put in place.
Well, first of all, I do not care for the governor's terminology. Any job that puts food on the table is essential. Pennsylvania is one of only 2 states in the nation that has put a moratorium on all construction projects. This ban has devastated our economy, created dangerous and unattended work sites, and will leave us with a supply shortage as retailers go out of business on a daily basis across the Commonwealth. The construction moratorium has also created immense hardships on families that were depending on their homes to be completed. I have one such constituent who reached out to me desperate for a waiver to allow his construction project to continue. He and his wife have sent their children away to stay with family over 600 miles away while the project is completed. And every day their project is delayed is another day that they are not reunited permanently as a family. Currently in Pennsylvania, it is illegal for a single plumber to work alone at an open-air job site, but dozens, if not hundreds of people can pack into a big box store where sanitation standards are much harder to maintain. That is why we must pass, and the governor must sign, Senate Bill 613, which will bring Pennsylvania under the far more objective CISA guidelines and will allow construction to resume while maintaining CDC prevention standards. The construction industry must be allowed to resume for the sake of all Pennsylvanians.
Some of the people working from home. My husband and my son are also there. My son taking college courses and my husband working. So one of the first pieces we took up in response to the pandemic was Senate Bill 751, dealing with education and education in our schools. The bill eliminates the 180-day instruction requirement on all public and non-public schools. The Department of Education has canceled the PSSA testing and the Keystone exam for the 2019-20 school year, and this includes the Pennsylvania Alternate System of Assessment, PASA. Allow the Secretary of Education to increase the number of allowable flexible instruction days and waive the timeline regarding those days. Ensure there will be no loss of subsidies, and school entities must make a good faith effort to develop a plan to offer continuity of education using alternative means during a period of school closure. The Pennsylvania Department of Education must provide guidance. The intermediate units can provide technical assistance and have been meeting with our school districts since the first closure of the schools. Our schools have a plan in place and are beginning to submit them. And they must plan these plans for the schools, and they must submit them to the Department of Education and post them on their websites. Broadband and internet access is very challenging in rural Pennsylvania. In the Pennsylvania House, we have a broadband caucus, and we had previously been working on ways to provide every Pennsylvanian with access. The Federal CARES Act contains $2 trillion and several provisions specifically to address these concerns, from rural health care to broadband deployment pilot programs to rural utilities service distance learning and telemedicine, Veterans Administration mental health services, museum and library digital networks, and small business administration loan forgiveness.
It's no secret that the shutdown has devastated the economy on both the national and state level. Unfortunately, that pain is felt more acutely in Pennsylvania, where we lead the nation in unemployment claims. While there are no concrete numbers yet, our initial estimates are that if everything returned to normal on April 30th, the state could still face a budget shortfall of up to $6 billion. Anticipating this shortfall, the House Republican caucus has instituted a hiring freeze. The governor has laid off thousands of state workers, and legislation has been introduced to put a hold on any new spending contracts by state agencies. Given that our rainy day fund has already been depleted, we will need to be looking to serious cutbacks in state spending as tax revenues continue to decline. On the positive side, we have just recently passed a bill out of the House that would allow us to take advantage of low interest rates to refinance state debt and save money. This crisis has created economic hardships for many Pennsylvanians who have had to make tough financial cutbacks to balance their budgets. The state should do the same. Now is not the time for more debt or more tax increases.
There has been no conversation at the current time about moving the primary out further than the June 2nd date. But if we have not peaked and things don't improve, I am sure we have to consider our options. There has been talk between the election offices about an all-mail-in ballot for the primary, as opposed to either mail-in, absentee, or going to the polls. There have been no final decisions made at this time. As you can imagine, there are strong feelings on both sides of this issue. For those who would like to vote by mail, please go to the website from the Department of State for information. It is my hope that by June, we will have begun to return to our normal life and routines.
We initially extended the date of the Pennsylvania primary out of an abundance of concern for our poll workers, many of whom are in that upper age bracket that puts them most at risk. In addition, many of our polling precincts are located within nursing homes. As of now, the statewide data for new cases continues to trend steadily downward. Hopefully that continues to be the case and we won't need to consider any further extensions.
Employers do have until June 30th to restore full-time employment, and any salary levels for changes that were made between February and the end of April. Again, the idea is to keep individuals on payroll. If an employer was forced to furlough any employees, the idea is to bring them back, although it's not individual specific. It's based on FTEs. So in order to be eligible for forgiveness under this program, to have that loan operate as more of a grant, you will need to make sure to have your FTEs and salary levels back to that level by at least June 30th.
The economic damage that the Commonwealth has suffered is severe, and as such, we must take action now if we are to have any shot at lasting economic growth at the end of this crisis. From a financial standpoint, that means making Pennsylvania a more competitive state in which to do business through comprehensive tax reform. Representative Frank Ryan and I have already introduced legislation to suspend payment and collection of the sales tax and the personal income tax for the duration of the disaster declaration. Eliminating the sales tax will help those who are unemployed by increasing their purchasing power with limited resources. And eliminating the personal income tax will allow those who are still employed to keep more of their money. The economic experts do agree that the best way to mitigate economic damage during times of hardship is to keep more money in the hands of the taxpayers. Beyond the disaster declaration, we have to address our sky-high corporate net income tax and our gas tax, which is one of the highest in the nation. In addition to many other taxes levied by the state government, there's little incentive to do business in Pennsylvania. We must also pursue aggressive professional licensure reforms. The Department of Health has eased numerous requirements for workers in the Commonwealth during this time of crisis. These licensing requirements are a hindrance to would-be workers in the Commonwealth, and if we don't need these requirements during a time of hardship, we must ask ourselves if we need them at all. If we are to hope to salvage any part of the booming economy we once had, we must take these steps toward comprehensive tax reform and professional licensure reform sooner rather than later. It goes without saying that our small businesses are the main drivers of Pennsylvania's once thriving economy, and anything that we can do to help those small businesses is essential. As I stated before, Representative Frank Ryan and I have introduced legislation to suspend imposition and collection of both the sales and personal income tax, which will certainly help small business owners and individuals alike. In addition to that, the legislature is considering a property tax freeze to provide relief to homeowners and property owners across the Commonwealth. I would support any effort that would keep more money in the pockets of Pennsylvania taxpayers because, as I said, the economists all agree. The best way to mitigate economic damage is to keep money in the pockets of the people who earn it.
In politics and public policy, I think I retired my crystal ball many years ago when I found out it wasn't always right. But obviously, we are all hoping and praying that our economy and businesses will be able to rebound once the healthcare professionals have found that we're able to return to work. I think it's clear that for at least a period of time, there will be a new reality in how employers can operate with respect to adhering to CDC guidelines, adhering to rules related to social distancing. Many employers, I'm sure, will be required to provide personal protective equipment, PPE, to their employees. Many of those materials are now being reserved exclusively for the healthcare sector, as certainly makes sense. But ultimately, employers will have to, will either be required to or will have to figure out how to operate and be able to maintain the health and safety of both their employees and their customers. We at the PA Chamber are starting to bring stakeholders together to think about what an economic bounce back, what an economic recovery package looks like, with the goal of bringing Pennsylvania back. And we will be relying on the input from our chamber partners around Pennsylvania. You're the ones who know your communities, who know your employers, and are going to be a critical voice as we think about what policies will be necessary or helpful to restart Pennsylvania's economy. And we know based on experience, when businesses, when the chamber community is working together, that gives us our best opportunity for success.
The House of Representatives has passed a bill to enable school districts to develop remote learning programs for their students. Necessity really is the mother of invention, and it's been heartwarming to see stories of teachers all across the Commonwealth coming up with innovative ways to stay in touch with and to continue to teach their students. As this crisis comes to a close, I have no doubt that the innovative methods and processes that we have developed will continue to have long-term application in the future.
I know there are many other questions out there, and I do encourage you to check out our website, pachamber.org, or you're welcome to contact me directly if there are questions I was not able to get to.
As we all know, our health and long-term care facility systems are pleading with our help so they can purchase everything from N95 masks to ventilators as the coronavirus cases continue to expand. Please remember to support our frontline workers and their families, from those providing our health care, our emergency responders, to our social service agencies trying to anticipate and meet the needs of every individual in our communities. We are in uncertain times. It is more important now more than ever to communicate with your elected officials. Please be a good neighbor, check in on the elderly and those most vulnerable during this crisis. I look forward to seeing all of you at the next Chamber breakfast, if not before. Thank you, and please stay safe.